Bhante Kondanna is a Theravada Buddhist monk who is currently the senior meditation teacher at the Vipassana Meditation Center in Moratuwa, Sri Lanka. A meditator for 15 years, he was an engineer in the United Kingdom prior to becoming a monk. Bhante tours the West annually, giving teachings and leading meditation retreats. He is thoroughly conversant with English and is known for his excellent rapport with students.
Dear friends, let us examine if one can use the teachings of the Buddha, who lived 620 years ago, 620 years BC, whether they are still applicable to us. And how can one use these teachings in one's daily life? I would be quite shy to call the teachings of Buddha a religion, because most religions are based on beliefs. And I wouldn't want to call Buddhism a philosophy, because philosophy is something that you philosophize. It's not necessarily a way of life. Teachings of Buddha is really a way of life that transform a human being from an ordinary human being into an extraordinary human being. Buddha himself, Gautama the Buddha, was an ordinary human being. He was born just an ordinary human being, born as a prince. And he ended up as an extraordinary human being. He reached a perfection that any human being could reach. Whereas his life was a living embodiment of the ultimate perfection of wisdom. It was a living embodiment of compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, altruistic joy. And he taught human beings, especially to live and conduct our life in such a way so as to have the maximum joy of one's life. How can this be brought about? What does one have to be to use the teachings? One does not have to call oneself a Buddhist to use the teachings. One does not have to swear allegiance to the Buddha. For he said to use the teachings to guide you to the arising of wisdom within yourself. Use the guidance and instructions to bring that about without clinging to it, without being a fanatic. Not to become attached to the teaching or to the community of monks and nuns, but to use the teachings and the symbolism wisely to bring about a state of peace and harmony within ourselves. One does not have to give up one's religious practices. One does not have to become anything special. It is actually necessary to become more tuned with the reality. if one were to call the teachings anything, I would call it realism. To be aware of the reality of one's self, the body, the mind, the mental states, and phenomena that governs this body and mind process, the phenomena of the world. One of the important aspects of the teaching, it's his attitude. And these teachings are useful to bring about a total transformation of one's attitude to oneself and to others. It specifically emphasizes that how important it is to establish a lovingly kind attitude towards oneself. Without establishing a lovingly kind attitude towards oneself, it is almost impossible to establish a lovingly kind attitude towards anybody, to without. This is something that one must reflect about. It is almost like if you don't earn enough money and have it in your pocket, you don't have anything to give to anybody. If you don't know how it is to be kind to yourself, if you don't know how it is to be patient with one's own shortcomings, how can one establish a patient attitude towards other people's shortcomings? If we go about condemning our shortcomings, that would be a disaster, because we would project the same attitude towards others' shortcomings, thereby never being able to establish any peace or harmony or concord with others. Human beings, a way of getting rid of one's aversions instead of accumulating, then day by day, month by month, until it suddenly explodes. And then you have to give up your wife, your husband, your employer, your employee, your friend. It shows us how we can, by using the teachings, learn the art of letting go of aversions, letting go of irritations, letting go of annoyances from moment to moment, without allowing them to accumulate and explode and bring about a complete destruction of peace and harmony to oneself and to others. It is quite normal among human beings, especially between husbands and wives and friends, girlfriends and boyfriends, that a little aversion begins in the mind, and as days goes by one starts feeding it, until after some time the aversions become so strong that you give up your husband or your wife, and then you replace it with a new husband or a new wife, and the same thing, you go through the same thing. Aversion begins, one indulges in it and accumulates and explodes, and then again you have to change.